Welcome to Doors to Hope and Healing, an inside look at the many facets of work that is happening at the Department of Children and Families, between our staff, the families we serve, and our community partners. My name is Jacqueline Ford. I have had the honor of working for the department for almost 30 years. And although I may be familiar with many of the topics we bring to you, I have invited experts in those fields to help us dispel the myths and misconceptions that can often be barriers to our work. Join us as we open our doors and invite you to have a seat at our table. Allison, thank you so much for being on the set of Doors to Hope and Healing. We have a very heavy but important topic that we're going to talk about today. Before we get into the content of our show, can you just introduce yourself to our viewers?
Sure, absolutely. And I just want to thank you for having me on the show. My name's Allison Creamy. I am a program supervisor for the Department of Children and Families in the Division of Substance Misuse, Intimate Partner Violence, and Recovery Services.
Wow, and we had Chris Robles on our show, our last segment, and he talked to us about substance misuse and informed us all about what we can look for. So it's a pleasure to have you on
Thank you so
today
much.
And to educate our community about what intimate partner violence is. Before we do that, let's talk a little bit about what the mission of the Department of Children and Families is. And I ask that because all of our work is based upon what our mission and our values are at the department. Can you tell us what the mission is at the department?
Yeah, so for the department, safety, well-being, permanency, obviously, safety and well-being of children at the forefront. But with regard to intimate partner violence, because we're going to be talking about that today, as a department, obviously child protection is paramount. But when we're dealing and working with families impacted by intimate partner violence, we definitely are looking at the safety and well-being of the caretakers and parents involved. So it's all encompassing.
So for the sake of our viewers who are watching, we're going to be referring to intimate partner violence as IPV. And I know that we often use expressions like that and people don't know what we're talking about, but that's what we're going to be referencing today. What is IPV and how does that differ as a term to domestic violence or DV?
And that's a great question. So intimate partner violence and domestic violence are used interchangeably. And as, a community, as a society, as we became more and more educated around intimate partner violence, domestic violence, family violence, what we learned was the terminology domestic violence, it encompasses things from intimate partner violence to family violence situations. It could encompass like elder abuse situations, violence that occurs between adult siblings. And when we're talking about intimate partner violence, that's describing physical violence, sexual violence, stalking, psychological aggressions that have taken place by a current or former partner. And so it's looking at that intimate relationship, whether the individuals are together still or not, and it lets us better provide for planning and working with that family or individual.
Well, thank you for that. Yeah. And how does Connecticut rank statistically wise?
Yeah. So, giving you some kind of statistics that we have, I'm going to give you a few for Connecticut. So 37.7% of Connecticut women and 33.9% of Connecticut men experience intimate partner violence, intimate partner sexual violence, and or intimate partner stalking during their lifetime. Another Connecticut statistic, 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men have experienced some form of physical violence by an intimate partner. Nationally, about 16 million women and 11 million men who reported experiencing contact sexual violence, physical violence, or stalking by an intimate partner in their lifetime said they first experienced these forms of violence before the age of 18.
Wow, that's a powerful statistic.
Yeah.
And I think it's important for us all to know that it's happening in beginning those first signs. And so tell us, what are the signs of intimate partner violence?
Sure. So again, from our department and the staff that we have, education and knowledge and community partnering is key in learning and being able to provide information, right? And so very often individuals will think that intimate partner violence is physical violence. And there's so many layers to intimate partner violence, right? You do have physical violence, but there's emotional abuse, right? There's psychological abuse and control. There's isolation, intimidation. There's digital abuse. And so being able to educate and provide that information to people to then be able to look at what some of the signs may be, right? So name calling, right? Someone insulting you, putting you down, preventing you and discouraging you from being around your family, your friends, not wanting you to go to work, right? Some other signs can be just isolation around not allowing you to use the car, not letting you go to medical appointments or treatment appointments, acting jealous or possessive, constantly accusing someone of being unfaithful, just trying to control finances, money, not allowing access to money, just getting angry and frustrated. It could be a person who will use that intimidation tactic and may not get physically violent, may throw or break things, slam things down. Sometimes individuals reported that there are signs, just facial expressions that are given. And so, as we talk to individuals who've experienced intimate partner violence and we start learning more and more signs, symptoms, things that have occurred, one of our roles is to educate individuals and to get that information out, right? Because everybody makes a difference in this, and knowledge is key.
It is. So if a family becomes familiar with our department, what type of assessments or screening do we do if someone were to call and say that they have a family member or someone in their community that they feel is at danger of IPV and their children are at risk?
So screening for intimate partner violence occurs on any case that the department's involved in, right? There's questions, there's protocols that individuals are asked, right? And a lot of that is around healthy relationships, help us understand how your relationship works. Obviously, if there are concerns that are reported around the intimate partner violence piece, that screening gets more involved. So when we have current involvement, the department uses, it's called structured decision-making tools, and that guides kind of our practice and our decision-making, looking and identifying safety and risk. So during that screening and assessment, it's key to find out, what are the priority needs, right? When it comes to intimate partner violence. How are they going to be addressed? Are they being addressed? With IPV, intimate partner violence, part of our screening and assessment is exploring what the frequency and severity of that violence has been. What has been the level of exposure that the children may have had, right? And again, during screening and assessment, it's also a place of educating and informing, because if a child may not have been in the middle of an incident that occurred, there very well still could be impact. So if the child comes home and sees things are broken, or may see a parent having marks or bruises, or may learn that they have to go stay somewhere else, or that they may not be able to see one of their caretakers because there was an incident, that very well can impact that child. And so part of our assessment, and when we're talking about and screening for IPV, is having conversations with caretakers and the individuals involved just about those things, but also assessing, when we're looking at that severity piece, what has been the level of threats and violence? It's everything from, have weapons been used, threats with weapons, threats to kill or harm, threats to harm themselves, the isolation piece, the list I went through earlier. We're exploring protective capacity in that screening and assessment. What is the individual, what is the recipient of aggression's protective capacity? What has that person been doing already to keep themselves and their children safe? What resources and supports, natural supports, do they have? Can we build on those things? Are they willing to bring those people to the table to help plan with us? And then when we're also in that assessment and screening piece, we're also looking at the person using violence, the person who chose to use violence, and asking them what they're able and willing to do. Are they able to talk about the violence piece? Are they able to see how using violence has not been appropriate, how it's not only harmful to children, their partner, but to themselves, and what barriers get set up when a person's using violence, trauma around that, and really getting the person to a place of wanting to commit to making behavioral changes to stop using violence. So it's a very involved, in-depth assessment and screening. And at the end of the day, what we do is we have intimate partner violence RRGs, and they're called in to also consult.
So in the tools and the assessments that you were explaining and involving the recipient of the aggression as well as the person who is aggressive, are the children involved in that tool and that assessment as well as far as using their voice to share what they've been experiencing?
Yeah. So most definitely, obviously, depending on the age of a child and the level of understanding, children are definitely included in that. We definitely want to know what they've seen, what they've heard, how it made them feel, reassuring them that they're not responsible for the violence that's occurred, reassuring them that it's not their fault, right? Discussing, ways that the children can be safe, and then hopefully coming to a place, that their voices, their little voices or older adolescent voices can be heard. And if they, can share that it is scaring me or I don't like when this happens, being able to voice those concerns and use that in our screening and our development of a plan, right? And sometimes the voice of the child is what helps us get a parent to want to, change that behavior and want to be the best parent they can be. And also in talking to the children, pulling out and them identifying the strengths that those parents and caretakers have and building on those. Because that's a huge part of what we do too. When we come to the table, we want to draw out those natural strengths that each parent has, right? And each caretaker has, and then build on those. And then be able to work through the identified needs, right? Which, if it's intimate partner violence, that's the identified need. How can we work together to get through this, right? If it is identified as a safety factor, can we get to a place to mitigate that safety factor? Can we draw on the parents? Can we draw on their natural supports? Can we draw on community providers to be able to get to a place where we mitigate a safety factor where children are not safe and that they are deemed safe and we can move forward?
I can imagine there's impact on the recipient of the aggression. Can you talk about what that impact is?
So impact on recipients of aggression, obviously it comes in many forms. There can be impact due to physical injuries and physical harm that's occurred. And those physical injuries can be things from, scrapes, bruises, to severe injuries. Impact, if it's a situation, there are times where recipients of aggression, strangulation has been used, which has restricted their airway. And there are times where there's long-lasting headaches, problems with speaking. And that's where our department, although, our workers and all of us are very clear we're not medical professionals, we encourage recipients of aggression to still seek medical attention around that. There are organizations out there. DEMIS has an acute brain injury team that looks at recipients of aggression who have suffered strangulation, and they do assessments and provide supports. So again, in our screening and assessment and pulling out, when I talked about earlier, looking at the severity and frequency of violence, having the detailed information around what a person's endured, it helps set up the treatment plan and what's needed moving forward.
So what is the common response to that trauma that in your expertise, in the role that you have with the department, what is a common response to that trauma of being the recipient of that aggression?
So it's not uncommon for a recipient of aggression to be very guarded, okay? And so if it's the department that's coming into play and having that contact, a recipient of aggression can present guarded and just fearful, right? Fearful of systems getting involved, right? We don't know what the degree of violence that they've been through has been. We don't know if there's been threats made, threats around department or other agencies being used. And so, our first contact and thereafter, building and engaging a relationship with all parties, but that recipient of aggression, building trust that we're there to work together for safety of everyone, it's key. And trying to break down some of those barriers around the fear. And that's where pulling in community providers really comes into play. As a department, we have a great partnership with the Connecticut Coalition of Domestic Violence, who has 18 member centers across Connecticut. And they have very key players, community providers, advocates. So oftentimes we will pull in those individuals to partner with us, to come to the table, to support a recipient of aggression so that they see a team of us there to work with them. And so, those are the approaches we take. We try to break down some of the feelings of helplessness, having them hold on to hope for change. We also, as a department and our workers, we have been instilling that we are not here to come from a place of judgment. We're not here to tell a person who they should be in a relationship with. What we're here for is if there are safety concerns and children's safety is being impacted, but then also looking at the safety of the parents and adults involved, we are there to help and intervene to say, hey, let's work together. There are things that need some help here, and let's see how we can work together to do that.
And I think that leads to my next question about, of course, it's so important to establish trust, especially in a situation that involves the intimate partner violence. But what role does DCF play in these cases? I know there's a lot of collaboration with outside agencies and building that trust, but what role do we play as a state agency?
Yeah. So as a state agency, obviously if a case comes to the department's attention, then we have a responsibility to follow the protocol of following structured decision making, using our SDM tools and guidance, and working on that case, partnering. So we have a responsibility with an IPV situation that we're not only working with the recipient of aggression, we're working with the person who uses violence. Obviously, we're meeting with them separately. We're also meeting with the children, and we're figuring out what are the best supports and services to help these individuals. And really engaging that person using violence is key, and key from the start, because getting a commitment for that person to want to make changes and committing to stopping the use of violence is really going to help guide the case situation, practice, and where things are going. And also helping the recipient of aggression be able to focus on healing and their treatment, addressing any trauma they endured from the violence that was going on, and also helping a child see that there is a parent or a caretaker or someone who did demonstrate violent behaviors, but is now stepping up to say, you know what, I don't want to do that anymore, and I want to change those behaviors, and I want to be the best version that I can be of myself, and I want to be a healthy and safe parent.
So when we talk about a report being initiated to the department by a concerned family member, community member, mandated reporter, and we have the protocol that we have to follow on all cases, but does having a case that's substantiated with neglect or abuse because of intimate partner violence, does that automatically mean that the child's removed from the home and placed into a family situation or with foster care?
Just because a case comes to the department's attention for IPV, and even with the substantiation, it doesn't mean that a removal is going to occur. Again, the department acts on situations if a child is deemed unsafe, and that that child being unsafe and those safety factors can't be mitigated, you know, and that is not something that's looked at lightly. So if a safety factor gets identified, that team works very, very hard with the family, with their natural supports, to develop a plan on how can we mitigate this? Can we mitigate this? Can we stay at this table and figure out a plan on how to move from a child being unsafe to them being safe? But at the end of the day, if a child is deemed not safe, then we have a responsibility. And that is not every situation, because like I said, the teams will sit for hours to work out a plan if there is a safety situation. So back to your question, a child is not removed on every case that comes to the department's attention for intimate partner violence.
Okay.
The focus is partnering with those individuals to get to a place of safety, emotionally and physically.
You mentioned the RRG, so if you can explain to us what the RRG is and what the IPV specialists are that we have throughout the state in the different regions of DCF.
So I said DCF RRG. So RRG means Regional Resource Group. So within, you know, we have 6 regions, DCF regions across the state, and we have numerous offices, right, within those regions. In each office, we have an RRG team. And that Regional Resource Group team consists of mental health consultants, substance misuse consultants, educational consultants, nursing consultants, and intimate partner violence specialist consultants. And so if a case comes to the department's attention, or if a concern of intimate partner violence comes up on a case that may already be active, a team will reach out to have a consultation with the intimate partner violence specialist. And so what that individual does is they will meet, they get all the case information, they meet with the team. It is very common that they then will meet with the individuals involved. So that's a recipient of aggression, a person that may be using violence. They can meet with the children along with the recipient of aggression. They meet with community providers, and then they help build that plan. They help with safety planning. They help with referrals to community providers for intimate partner violence supports and services. They actually are gatekeepers. The department, we have 2 contracted intimate partner violence services. We have an IPV FAIR program and an MST IPV program. And both those programs will work with the entire family to address IPV concerns. They work with the individuals in the family separately, and then when it's deemed safe, and if the parties are willing, they will do work together. And so that intimate partner violence specialist is the gatekeeper for those services. They operate monthly review meetings on those services. They hold partnerships. I mentioned that the Connecticut Coalition Against Domestic Violence has 18 member centers. So depending on the community center where the IPV consultant works, they build relationships in the community with those individuals. So they can pick the phone up and make a call with the recipient of aggression together. They can help advocate for those things. And they're key in helping build a safety plan. And if I can talk a little bit about safety planning.
Sure, we have a few more minutes.
Yeah, so safety planning in IPV, it's the plan that recipients of aggression use, right? And so most recipients of aggression already have a safety plan. And so our role is to ask them about their safety plan, ask them what's worked in the past and what hasn't, and then to ask them if they're willing to work with us to develop a plan together. So
as we end, so we have a few more minutes left, and I don't want us to not talk to us about, you know, our viewing audience and the staff that will be seeing this segment of Doors to Hope and Healing. Why is it important for our community to understand what intimate partner violence is?
So it's really important for the community to understand intimate partner violence because it takes all of us, right, to come together, to educate, and to address something that impacts people all over the world, right? So it doesn't matter race, ethnicity, age, culture, sexual orientation. socioeconomics, IPV impacts all individuals. And the more people that come together and are educated on resources, supports, signs, symptoms, that people who use violence can change that behavior, the more we're there to help advocate and be there for people who feel like they're alone and in silence. So I think that's key. Again, we haven't walked a day in the shoes of a recipient of aggression, and although they're feeling, scared, frustrated, and alone, I just want recipients of aggression to know they're not alone. There are supports and resources available. The Connecticut Coalition Against Domestic Violence has a 24/7 hotline. It's called Safe Connect. Again, it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The number is 1-888-774-2900. People can text, email, or call that number, and they will set individuals up from everything from just talking to someone, to safety planning, to advocacy, to if somebody needs confidential shelter, and again, just needs to make a call and talk to someone.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for being on the show today and for talking about this very serious and heavy topic. But knowing that there is this work that the department is doing in collaboration with our community partners, it's really making a difference for our families.
Yes.
Thank you for watching Doors to Hope and Healing. If you have any questions or concerns about someone in your life who may be the victim of intimate partner violence, please feel free to make a call to the number that is on the bottom of the screen.